Hey, Sixers. How you doing? We're going to be going and continuing to look at the factors that led to a weakening economically and militarily of the Roman Empire, leading to its collapse in the 5th century. The first article that you're going to read kind of is a little bit redundant on the articles that you read yesterday. So I'm going to go a little bit quickly through it. But here you see Romans fighting Romans. And that's because one of the greatest enemies that the Roman Empire had to deal with was the Roman Empire. Roman legions were often in combat with one another instead of focusing on combating external forces that were gathering and threatening the empire as it had expanded very far. The Roman military would only support whoever would give them the most wealth, and this often leads Roman legions to throw their support into some pretty unqualified emperors and leaders. If Joe Schmo was really wealthy and had no political experience but would give us a lot of money, let's make him the emperor. They didn't really care about having somebody who could do a good job governing. They only cared about putting someone in power who could make them wealthier. And we see factions of one legion would often war against each other, would attack each other's choice for emperor. Hence why we saw so many emperors getting assassinated and murdered in the last unit. And that outside pressure really increases because the army is so stretched thin and often fighting against itself. And we're going to see that Roman enemies on all directions are going to put more and more pressure on them. You see here the Emperor Valerian, who was captured in war by the Persian army and was forced to live his life as a slave. The king of the Persians would use the Roman emperor as his own footstool to get on his horse. And then when he finally died from being horribly abused and tortured, they had Valerian skin dyed red and then stuffed like a trophy and put inside one of his temples. So we see people getting more and more aggressive towards not just Rome, but if somebody tried to take a swing at Augustus, that would have been unforeseen. But now the Roman emperor himself is seen as more and more touchable, not this untouchable, all-powerful force. And we're going to see that since the Roman Empire can't really fight off a lot of these forces effectively, in order to stave them off, basically the empire starts paying tribute to these armies and gives them bribes, pays them money as a way of getting them to not attack them. So the Roman army can't defend them, and the Roman government now has to basically bribe foreign armies not to attack them. And this is just going to drain more and more and more money from the Romans. So they're paying a bunch of money to the Roman army, who basically says, if you don't give us land and money, we'll kill you. Internally. And externally, they're paying a bunch of money to people like the Persians and a lot of the barbarian tribes, like the Visigoths and the Vandals and others. They're paying them money saying, hey, eventually the Huns, please don't attack us. Here's money. Just leave us alone. And this just makes the economy of Rome go south. Roman currency is going to lose its value so much, whereas before gold, the coins that we talked about in Rome had so much value that it made Rome a trading powerhouse. Roman currency almost has no value, and fewer people north. There they are. Territories, you see that they're employing women in their armies, which is very common, and was something that the Romans did not do. They fought a different style of war. They often used axes. I didn't rely as heavily on armor. They fought a different type of warfare. And we're going to see that the Romans and the Germanic states, the tribes like the Franks, the Saxons, the Vandals, the Visigoths, and the Ostrogoths, By the way, Goths gets its term from the Visigoths, who wore a lot of dark clothing and makeup. Pretty cool, right? Anyway, these different barbarian societies had warred with the Romans when they were really at their peak. And as the Roman Empire was expanding, it kind of hits a wall with these barbarians where they can't really get much more past the Danube River. And they pretty much set that as a line. The barbarians get anything that is north of that river, we get everything that's south. And they coexist for a few hundred years. Sometimes they'll battle, but sometimes they'll trade. And we're going to see that more and more of these barbarians are going to integrate more into Roman society and Roman army, especially those that live along the border. And as trade and interaction with the barbarians and Romans increases, we're going to see that the barbarians serving as Roman soldiers is going to steadily climb. And by the year 400, most of the Roman military is no longer Roman. It's barbarian, the people who they're trying to protect themselves from. And this is going to get expounded even more so in the 4th century, as many Germanic tribes that were on the other side of the Danube River start fleeing into Rome, Roman territory, because of a group of people called the Huns, who are brutally attacking them. And to escape that, they basically say, hey, we'll join your army and we'll fight on your side to stop the Huns. But in the end, this Roman army is now mostly made up of people who aren't from Rome, who have no cultural connection to Rome, who have no loyal connection to Rome, and basically loyal to each other, to whoever their commanders are, and their main priority is not necessarily protecting Rome, but protecting each other and doing whatever can make them safer and wealthier. So that's a big factor that leads to weakening of the Roman military. Now, we're going to get into in the following lesson the Huns, but I did mention in the reading about them, so why don't we introduce the Huns? Oh yeah, there they are. The Huns. Who are they? The Huns were nomadic for the most part. They didn't live in cities. They mostly were on the move. They lived on horses. The expression was that a Hun keeps no nation except the back of a horse. Many accounts that they did pretty much ate, slept, lived, did most functions on horseback. If you were a Hun child, you grew up as an archer and as an equestrian from the time you could walk. So you were among the most expert horseback riders on the planet. A big part of their culture believed in that strength came from experiencing pain and giving up sacrifice. And if you notice, these gentlemen here, their faces look pretty heavily scarred, and there's a reason for that. Part of Hun culture was that when an infant was born, before they were allowed to drink from their mom's milk, they were ritually scarred in the face. As you see, in the areas on their cheeks, deep grooves were cut into this little baby's face because they thought that from birth they had to know that pain was a big part of life, and managing pain was a big part of building up your own internal strength. They only wanted strong warriors. You also see the indentation on the forehead, ritualized head flattening, using stones on infants when their skulls were still soft was also a big part of Hun culture, which was also practiced in different Native American societies like the Maya. And through that pain and sacrifice, they got the strength to become fierce warriors. And living nomadically, on the move, on the go, they basically saw the world as a resource. Not just as hunters and gatherers hunting and gathering food, animals and nuts and berries that grow in the wild, but hunting and gathering from any people who got in their way. and taking and pillaging whatever they could from them, and then moving on to the next place to conquer. They didn't necessarily have cities built out of stone. Their cities were built out of tents. So these people start pushing further and further west from parts of southern Russia, Central Asia, and Eastern Europe into the Germanic states, and eventually into parts of the Roman Empire, where they're going to become a big thorn in the side for the Romans, especially under the leadership of a guy by the name of Attila. We'll talk about him in the next lesson. But let's get to our question. Who were the barbarians? And I'd like you to describe that at least two ways that the barbarians played a role in the weakening of the Roman Empire. Thanks for watching. Have a terrific Tuesday, and I'll see you tomorrow.